Yemen's civil war already includes proxy armies, jihadists, cholera, famine. Now, is there a new front with the capital Sana'a already under the control of Houthi militias, fighting opening up in the second city, Aden, since Sunday? Southern separatists backed by the UAE locking horns with Saudi-backed government forces. Both Riyadh and the Emiratis urging restraint, a very localized dispute triggered by a demonstration ban, or does it run much deeper? Is there trouble among coalition partners who for 3 years have been fighting Iran-aligned Houthi militias with little to show for it? Little to show for it, critics would say, except for a humanitarian disaster in the Arab world's poorest state, with a brutal air campaign, famine. Even the UN's special envoy has had enough. He's quitting next month. So who's going to change this dynamic? Could Yemen return to its pre-1990 status and to break into pieces? And can the rest of the world continue to ignore a conflict raging at the entrance to the Red Sea? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Yemen on the brink. With us from Washington, Sama Al-Hamdani, director of Yemenati. Thank you for joining us. Tell us what Yemenati is.
So Yemenati was actually a blog that I started a long time ago on Yemen, where I wrote about foreign policy and the perspective of Yemenis that the U.S. needs to hear. Today, this has shifted into a conversation initiative where we're trying to protect Yemen's heritage and its culture.
Thank you for being with us. Thanks as well from Sana'a, the Yemeni journalist and activist, Hussein al-Bukaidi. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Hi.
And from London, Manuel Almeida, columnist with the newspaper Arab News. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Calls for calm issued on day 2 of the fighting, and with good cause, a tank battle breaking out in the streets of Aden earlier. Catherine Viette has more.
Deserted streets in Aden as one-time allies again clash in the southern city. Government forces loyal to President Abdel Rabb al-Shaddadi battle Yemeni separatists known as the Southern Transitional Council. They're calling for the government's ouster amid accusations of corruption and mismanagement. The Prime Minister has called their actions an attempted coup. The conflict threatens to fracture the fragile alliance, plunging the country into further turmoil. Now, members of the Saudi-led coalition are urging the government to open talks with the southern separatists.
The coalition and the legislative government call on the wisdom of the people of Aden and urge them not to continue the violence. And we are calling on the legitimate government to look into the demands of the political and social movement.
Tensions between the government and the Southern Transitional Council date back several decades. The separatists are seeking to return to an independent southern state that ceased to exist with Yemen's unification in 1990. 4 years later, secessionists launched a rebellion that was quashed by the northern forces of President Saleh. Now, Yemen's brutal 3-year civil war between Iran-backed Houthi rebels and the Saudi-supported government has reopened old wounds. When the Houthis seized the capital Sana'a in September 2014, the separatists initially supported the government, which set up a rival capital in Aden. But in July last year, the separatists established the Southern Transitional Council, demanding the government's resignation. The Southern Transitional Council is backed by the United Arab Emirates, part of the Saudi-led coalition, which supports Yemen's government in its fight against the Houthis.
Sama Al-Hamdani, did you see this coming?
I think that we all knew that there were tensions, that the situation of Yemen is moving in the wrong direction. Overall, I think we can criticize the internationally recognized government for failing to kind of answer the demands of the people in the south and in the north. The tension there is just brewing. It looks like it was going to head that way ever since the Southern Transitional Council was formed in 2017. It became clear that the coalition, and by that I mean the Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, did not have a clear vision of what they wanted Yemen to be post-Houthi presence. So while Aden, for example, is free of Houthi presence, it is not free of conflict. The situation there has not stabilized. The government failed to return. And like other parts of Yemen, the Yemenis are grieving. But this is really risky because if this continues, in essence, Yemen will continue to splinter and become several Yemens rather to just one country that has federal regions. And you know, moving forward, no one knows how you could kind of install institutions in these places, and the tension is likely to escalate if the president does not respond to the demands of the people and removes his prime minister and kind of creates a new cabinet.
And does it look like we're heading that way?
So far, it seems like it, although I do still believe that in Yemen it's easier to kind of calm things down. All it would take is for the government to kind of address the concerns of the people. And ultimately, we have to remember this when we talk about Yemen overall. There are a lot of regional influences that are coming in. This situation is no longer in the hands of Yemenis alone. So by that, I mean that if Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates kind of talk amongst themselves about what they want in the south, then it would be easier to convince the Yemenis in the south to follow along.
All right, before we talk about what they want in the south, Hussein al-Bukaidi, just to remind our viewers, Yemen, of course, once was, up until 1990, two nations.
Yeah, it was two nations, and after that it was the unity agreement between former President Ali Abdullah Saleh and as well the South President, which called Ali Salim al-Bid. But the war broke up in 1994 between the Socialist Party and Ali Abdullah Saleh Party, which led to the Saleh has controlled the whole country. And what we see today in Aden is not something that just happened in the last 40 to 72 hours. This has been happening since the withdrawal from Ansarullah, the Houthi, from the south after the invasion of the Saudi-led coalition. But today fight is different than the one before because it's bigger. But they have fought several times, if not more than a dozen times in that area, and it's really, really clear. And it's really funny that the Yemeni or Hadi government is calling this as an attempted, as a coup. And this coup is actually supported by the United Arab Emirates, who has come into Yemen with the Saudi Arabia to fight what they called Houthi coup. And they show you there are no Houthis in the south, but still the situation, especially the security situation there, is really, really bad. Al-Qaeda is running freely, and they haven't done anything. They haven't put an example to all Yemeni to say, look, we can run the country, we can build the country because the Houthi is not there. But seems to be that Houthis area security-wise are much, much better from these areas. And I'm sure that it's really that the United Arab Emirates, they don't want any stability in the south, especially in Aden, because Aden is a threat to Dubai port. If Aden thrive and if it become as it used before, then this mean will be less business for Dubai. And before the war, in the last 15 years, before the war, the Dubai port has run Aden airport for 15 years, but they haven't actually destroyed it. But when Ansarullah, the Houthi, has seized the whole country, then this is when they decided that they want instability in Yemen. It doesn't matter if they agree with the Houthi.
All right, let me bring in
instability.
Let me bring in Manuel Almeida here. Manuel, let me read to you back again. Once again, both the Saudis and the Emiratis urging restraint, as they put it, from the separatists, and for them to hold talks with, as they put it, the legitimate government. We can show you here the tweet from the UAE Foreign Minister, Anwar Gargash, and in it he says, again, this call for restraint. The UAE's position on the events in southern Yemen is clear, and based on its support for the Saudi-led Arab coalition, we have no pity for those who want the destabilization of the system. So they may there may be fighting among forces that are backed by that coalition. But the UAE and Saudi, are they singing from the same hymn sheet at this point over what to do?
I think obviously the UAE has strong ties with the Southern movement and its leaders. It has invested quite a bit in the south. It has trained militarily the Southern forces, while Saudi has historically and even geographically had a close relationship with the northern tribes. Now, this said, I don't think there's really a a strong dispute between the Saudi and Emirati leaderships over the situation in the south. I think both countries accept that Yemen has no future under the previous arrangement, whereby all the key decisions were made in Sana'a, while other regions of the country were ignored and neglected. And I'm pretty sure both leaderships share the concern about the impact this situation can have on the overall fight against the Houthis and the efforts to stabilize the country.
Sama Hamdani, you agree?
So I just want to point out something very clear. This is not, the separatist movement in the south is not a result of Houthi withdrawal from the area. This has been happening since 1994 very quietly, and then more prominently in 2007, and then more so since 2011. So the calls for secession in the south are actually really long, and the people in the south have grievances and feel like they were mistreated by the government. That was majority of them were northerners, that they feel that they have the right to secede. This is how the people in the south feel. Now, President Hadi, unfortunately, his policy towards his own country is not clear. He continues to appoint new people and fails to mention what exactly he wants to see happen in Yemen. Now, for example, in the south, there were rumors that he had struck an alliance with several separatist leaders, that he will protect the southern separatist interests and will help the south secede ultimately if they help him fight the Houthis. Now, I can't personally confirm these reports, but there was some kind of truth to it when he started appointing people who were hardliners and radical separatists in his own government. For example, the head of the Southern Transitional Council was at some point the governor of Aden. And once he removed him from power, he refused to step down. Like the government of the building of the governor in Aden still belongs to him. And he is now part of the Southern Transitional Council that's participating in this. This to me reminds me of a specific situation that took place in 2011-2012 in the capital of Sana'a, where the majority of the city became split neighborhood by neighborhood. Some parts defended Ali Abdullah Saleh, the former president of Yemen, the late former president of Yemen, and then the other parts belonged to Ali Muhsin, who was his military general, but also affiliated with Islah. Now we see a similar situation in the south, where neighborhood by neighborhood, Aden is being divided between forces that are loyal to President Hadi and forces that are loyal to the Southern Transitional Council, with pockets in between, which means that the majority of the civilians are at a standstill. And what we see right now is a possibility for escalation and further bloodshed.
And do you agree with Manuel that this is all beyond the control of the Saudis and the Emiratis?
I mean, I don't think that it's beyond their control. I think that the Yemenis are their proxy.
Manuel Almeida?
To an extent, I don't think Saudis and Emiratis control everything that goes on in Yemen. They have obviously a lot of influence, including financial influence. And talking about finances, I think it cannot be a coincidence that the ultimatum, last week's ultimatum from the Southern Transitional Council to Yemen's president to remove, or to the prime minister, or to reshuffle the government, which led to the present crisis, came almost immediately after the government announced its first budget in 3 years. So I think, again, the issue of resource distribution, which has long been a grievance, a legitimate grievance among Southerners, as Sama was explaining, has again come to the fore as a key issue.
All right, we're going to pick up on that point of the distribution of resources and how Yemen keeps it all together. When we come back, stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.
You might watch France 24 in English, but don't forget, France 24 is also broadcast in French, Arabic, and Spanish.
Muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos a las noticias de France 24.
Available on cable and satellite systems and online media in France and around the world.
Watch France 24 live and on demand via streaming devices such as Roku and Chromecast. Live in 3 languages on Sling in the USA. And on France 24 websites and free dedicated apps for mobiles and tablets.
Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval.
In 1996, conflict broke out in Nepal. Maoists tried to overthrow the monarchy to establish a People's Republic. Women and children joined in, taking up arms in support of the cause. Thousands of Nepalese died in a bloody civil war that lasted 10 years until peace was brokered in 2006. Today, former child soldiers are speaking out. They talk about the armed struggle and the sad memories. Our reporters met up with some of them, like Kamala. She went to fight at the age of 12. Now, she wants to fight for votes by getting involved in politics.
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. Before we resume the France 24 debate, plenty going on in the France 24 newsroom, including a breaking news story out of Washington. Let's cross now to correspondent Philip Crowther. Philip, the deputy director of the FBI, who was due to step down in a few weeks' time, has reportedly already left his job.
Yeah, he's gone now. Andrew McCabe, the deputy director of the FBI, has said that he is leaving that post. Now, whether that was done by his own accord or whether he was pushed that little bit by some members of the administration, we don't know at this point. In fact, very little is known about his departure other than it seems to be immediate. As you said, he was supposed to retire in March, so the simplest explanation for this is that he had some holiday time accrued, and that is actually true, and was able to leave this early. But let's not forget the context here, which is, of course, very controversial indeed, with the investigation into Russian meddling in the US election going full steam and seemingly coming to a head possibly over the next few months. Andrew McCabe, the deputy director of the FBI, had been criticized a lot by US President Donald Trump. He wanted him gone. Maybe that pressure was enough for him to go in the end. Republicans generally have been criticizing him a lot. This goes into a memo that exists that might be released later today by Congress about how the Russia investigation was started in the first place. As you can see, plenty of ingredients here, but no clarity really. But it adds to so many resignations and firings that we have already seen at the upper echelons of the intelligence community. Remember that Donald Trump fired the FBI director at the time, James Comey. Andrew McCabe was working underneath him at the time. He also was thinking about firing Robert Mueller, the man who's responsible for the Russia investigation, as was widely reported. He was thinking about doing that in the middle of last year. So there'll be a lot of speculation about why this departure is happening right now. But I've got to say, no concrete answer right now as to why.
All right, Philip Crowther, keeping a close eye on that story for us from Washington. We'll have more news for you at the top of the hour. Time now again for the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and, well, what can seem like a new front in the Arab world's poorest nation's civil war, Yemen, with tank battles taking place this Monday in the second city, Aden. Sama al-Hamdani, director of Yemenati and who's with the Yemen Cultural Institute, joins us from Washington to talk about it. This is a map you can see that dates back to what Yemen used to look like before 1990. We'll call that map up again in a moment. We're also joined from Sana'a by Yemeni journalist Hussein al-Bukaidi. Welcome back, and welcome back from London, Manuel Almeida, columnist for Arab News. If you're just joining us, the Saudi-led coalition that's been fighting those Iran-aligned Houthi militias, they have, well, a problem in that it's the United Arab Emirates that are backing these southern separatists. We've been talking about it in part one of our discussion, who now are at odds with those Saudi-backed pro-government forces. Hussein al-Bukaidi, in part one of our discussion, Sama al-Hamdani talking about the specter of perhaps Yemen breaking up into several pieces at this point. In Sana'a, how do people remember the days when there were, again, and we saw it with that map, two Yemens, not one?
Yeah, of course. Yemeni people remember when they were to Yemen and when it was hard to go from one area to another area to the south, because the south was loyal to the Soviet, to the communist, and the north was loyal to Saudi Arabia and United States. But after unity of Yemen, like family has come together, many people has traveled from the south to the north and as well the opposite, and life was much better for all Yemeni, because a united Yemen means a stronger Yemen. But seems to be now that for the United Arab Emirates and Saudi, for them to control key areas like Bab al-Mandab and to control the Yemen coast and as well the island, especially Socotra Island, they need to have a divided Yemen. This is a British tactic called divide and conquer, because if they really wanted the unity of Yemen as in the resolution 2216, then they could work much better than they doing now. They do agree about fighting the Houthi, but when it comes into the south, they make actually those fighting is not that United Arab Emirates disagree with Saudi Arabia. They actually making this on purpose. They want the southern people to fight, because they don't want only a southern state or a southern country. They want to divide that key area as well. Saudi Arabia want to seize Hadramaut, because Hadramaut is half a coast into the Arabian Sea, and they can by that do a pipeline to transport oil from the Gulf to avoid the Hormuz and the threat of Iran in Hormuz Strait. And United Arab Emirates want to control the Bab al-Mandab, and as well they want to control as well Aden, or at least not to have stability in Aden, as I mentioned before, because this is good as well for their key port in Dubai.
Let me ask Manuel Almeida about this. Is there a divide and rule strategy on the part of that Saudi-led coalition, Manuel?
Well, I think rumors about that have been around for quite a while. I think given the circumstances, I disagree that is the case. Now, I think the other two experts mentioned a critical issue, which is the issue of divisions, of regional divisions in Yemen. And it's not only an issue about north and south according to the borders that existed before unity. If we go back to the National Dialogue Conference, there was a federation arrangement of 6 regions, which was rejected. This arrangement was rejected by the Houthis and by Al-Hirak, which was the Southern secessionist movement that precedes the Southern Transitional Council. In a way, not completely, but in a way. And there were 2 regions in the south, not only one. Aden was accorded special status, and the 2 regions were one ruled by Aden and the other one was Hadramaut. So this to say that not all Southerners want a return to the 2 Yemens. We're talking about multiple Yemens. Now, I don't want to go on very long about this, want to give space for others, but it's also important to note that Southern leaders have been calling for a referendum on independence, but I think that at the moment poses two problems. One is to hold a referendum, an independence referendum, under present circumstances of instability and security. And insecurity, I think, is quite problematic. And the second issue is that it would clash with the outcomes if obviously there is a victory for independence in the referendum. It would clash with the outcomes of the National Dialogue Conference. So we're really looking at a very complex scenario.
Sama al-Hamdani, would Yemen be better off in several pieces?
You know, whether Yemen stays together or splits off to several pieces, they have a lot of work to do ahead of them. Yemen is facing a huge humanitarian crisis, and the bloodshed continues. And then you have the spread of illnesses, lack of infrastructure. A lot of children haven't been to school in a while. It just doesn't look good for Yemen whether they stay whole or split apart. Of course, if they split apart, it's going to be a lot more difficult to start institutions from the ground up. And I think that, you know, the previous speaker, Manuel, I think he mentioned something very important, and that is the failure of the national dialogue in kind of presenting solutions to these crises. You know, like at the start of, 2012, Yemen had a real potential to kind of avoid what we see today, but the process was not taken as seriously. Everybody assumed that if you had a conference and have the international community backing it, that would suffice to solve Yemen's problems. Now, if I may, I just want to point that Yemen, even though they joined forces in 1990, so it's a very young country, they really did not have a chance to flourish together. So by 1994, there was already a civil war. And that's not just to say that unity failed. It's to say that Yemen, whether north or south, really failed to transition from the past to the future or to kind of develop into a modern day state. I think what we see today is all these failures manifesting themselves. And I think what's most important here is that we've mentioned Saudi Arabia several times. We've mentioned the United Arab Emirates several times, but we failed to mention voices from the ground of young people from the south. The majority of Yemen's population now is under the age of 25. And those voices are absent from most conversations, whether in the north or in the south. And the people who are young continue to be dragged into battles that have historical, they have a historical background that they themselves may not understand. Now, what
I was going to ask you on that point was that when there was a few months back, the killing of former President Saleh, people were wondering, would it now open up a new chapter for Yemen? You talk about hearing from new voices. What has the killing of President Saleh done in retrospect?
I think, in essence, it was a miscalculation from the coalition in that they assumed that once they kill former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, there was an assumption that once the Houthis did that all former GPC forces would join them in their fight against the Houthis, but this wasn't the case. And that has to do a lot with the strategy towards Yemen. When this war started, they kind of made anybody who's not part of President Hadi's government an enemy. And so even though they're not necessarily enemies right now, but forces who are loyal to President Saleh find it hard to find themselves in alliance with the with the Saudi coalition right now. And so what's happening right now, you have the GPC, which is the General People Congress, that's trying to kind of regroup itself, figure a new position for it, because frankly, it doesn't seem that moving forward that the Houthis would suffice as the only force in the north.
So,
right now, you have a life situation where everybody's fighting. I think that once the war ends, everybody's going to have to come to the table and they will have to talk politics, because ultimately that is what's going to solve Yemen from the crisis that we're seeing today.
And who's going to be the mediator in all of this? Sama al-Hamdani, you're in Washington. What's the view? How invested in finding a peaceful solution is the United States?
Unfortunately, with the Trump administration, it seems that Yemen is seen as the background of Saudi Arabia. And I think that the entire will is going to be in the hands of Saudi Arabia, that once they're ready to come to the table and negotiate, I think that they can bring other people to the table. But it doesn't seem clear what the young Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is going to be coming to France soon, it's not clear what he wants to do entirely. Would he be willing to be at a table to discuss the future of Yemen with the southern Iraq and with the Houthis and with the other factions that are on the ground that we have yet to talk about on international news channels, because there are so many forces that are locally controlling Yemen, and each one of them will have to come to the table and discuss what's going on. And so even if we have a complete ceasefire from the regional aspect of the war, Yemen is still witnessing fighting and splintering from within that would need several sit-downs together. The peace process is going to be really long. And so no matter what way you spin it, it seems that fighting is only going to result in a worst-case scenario, and stopping the war immediately means that you still have a lot of issues to tackle, and the war is far from over.
Manuel Almeida, the Saudi crown prince, this, in a way, some have described this as his operation, the air campaign and the support for the government forces in Yemen. Does Mohammed bin Salman have a handle, have a grip on the complexity of Yemen as you've described it?
I think if you look back in history, at times Yemen and Saudi were almost the same country in parts, at least. And so, yes, I think Saudis are quite aware of the complexity of the social fabric and of all the alliances and the politics of Yemen. I do think there are some obvious red lines for the Saudis, and one of them is having the Houthis controlling the north, and with close ties to the Iranians. I'm one of those that believes that the Houthis and Iranians work closely together. But I think the Saudis would definitely allow, or at least agree with the presence of the Houthis, if the Houthis would agree to disarm and return to their origins as a political party. As for the sitting at the table with the representatives of the Southern movement, yes, I think that's definitely it has happened. Actually, Zubaydi, the leader of the Southern Transitional Council, was invited to Riyadh as soon as the Southern Transitional Council was announced. But I think, as someone was saying, the process, the overall peace-building process will be very long and very hard under present circumstances.
Hussein Al-Bukaidi, let me ask you, we've seen the announcement that the UN Special Envoy is throwing in the towel, retiring early from this job. Who should be the mediator? Who can step in to bring all sides to the table? Who would you like to see?
He hasn't retired earlier. I mean, he has been for 3 years and he hasn't done anything. He just simply failed. But I think any new mediator, he have not to be biased to any side. The main goal of a mediator first is the humanitarian crisis, the humanitarian issue.
Should it be somebody dispatched by the United Nations? What kind of profile would you like to see?
It should be somebody, of course, from the United Nations, and it should be someone with an experience, like that he has worked in previous conflict, either especially in the region. Walid Sheikh, he had no political experience. He used to work with the United Nations in Africa, fighting, I believe, Ebola outbreak many years ago. So it was really bad to bring someone into the political issue or a war issue like in Yemen. And as I mentioned, it must be first, the humanitarian crisis must come first. The airport, port, food has to come really easy to Yemen, because Yemeni people are starving in all areas across Yemen. But we have seen that the failure of the former envoy is that he actually was totally kind of with the Saudi, and to prove that he has never ever example condemned any Saudi airstrike on civilians area. He even said about the strike that has killed and injured thousands of people in the funeral hall in Sana'a. He has called it an incident, and he hasn't mentioned the Saudi in his statement to the United Nations. But on the other hand, when any attack from the Houthi against Saudi military or against Saudi position, he always condemn the Houthi, and they show you that he was totally biased. So it should be somebody totally the opposite, someone who mainly care about the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, because Yemeni people must come first before any other party or any country like Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates.
Sama Al-Hamdani, let me ask you, your job is effectively to raise awareness and to draw attention to the plight of Yemen's people right now. Why is it so hard to get their attention when you have this country, this beautiful country that is in such a strategic place at the entrance there to the Red Sea?
I have to be honest here, and I have to say that it's been a lot easier to talk about Yemen in the past, and it's getting harder and harder as the war continues and as new regional powers gain interest in the region. I think that everybody is looking to attack everybody. The narrative of war has changed the temperament of Yemenis. It is hostile. Everybody is taking sides. There is blood spilt, and there is a lot of anger and pain. And on top of that, I think that Yemen is going to witness a time period that's going to be extremely dark moving forward. And unfortunately, all the political factions don't seem like they want to compromise even a little bit for the sake of Yemenis. For instance, every time you would talk to the Houthi group and you would say, return to your area and hand over the guns, they would refuse to do so unless other factions do the same. And it seems to be very hard to demand such a thing when everybody in Yemen is armed. And it's very unfortunate because there's ongoing fighting that's happening in the north. However, the fight that we see yesterday and today is pretty much an entirely separate story that's happening in the south. And the people continue to pay the price. And of course, I agree with you that it is a beautiful country, and it's very hard to see what's happening, where not only is the country facing war, but also its heritage, it's being slowly stolen from it, because Yemen's heritage is alive, and it has to do with how the country lives and survives for that to continue. And so speaking about this, it's very hard when you have such powerful countries with such interest in Yemen without anybody advocating for peace. Yemen right now has no country that has a face that is championing peace in the region. And actually, we might even look at the French president in the upcoming days to bring up Yemen to the young Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and possibly, who knows, it could be in the hands of the French.
Possibly could be in the hands of the French. We'll see when MBS comes to Paris. Sama Al-Hamdani, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
From Washington. I want to thank Hussein Al-Bukaidi for being with us from Sana'a, and from London, Manuel Almeida. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. Let me say hello to James Creedon. Yeah, we heard our panelists there conclude by issuing a plea for France's president to bring up Yemen when MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, comes to Paris.
That's right. So a lot of focus on MBS indeed. And there's one, just looking on Twitter at the kind of major reactions that have got the most shares in the last while. There was a lot of pressure in London as well for the Saudi prince not to be welcomed. This is going back a few days, but you can see here one activist tweeting this: "Well done everyone who made it to Downing Street to hand in a letter demanding that the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is not invited to London. This man is so much worse than Trump. He is what he is calling there the butcher of Yemen." And you can see that there was that focus, as you mentioned as well, on pressuring Emmanuel Macron. Here as well in the US, Yemen can't wait is the hashtag there. Protest against US support for Saudi-led airstrikes in Yemen's war outside US Senator Schumer and Gillibrand rather, his office there. So certainly there's a lot of activism going on online and elsewhere. Now this is the International Red Cross. Wow. This is a tweet from just today, and look at this for a sorry list. Food and water limited, sewage systems failing, health system decimated, medical supplies scarce, imports restricted, basics of life denied, war raging. Welcome to Yemen, where 80% of the population has little means for survival. And this is millions and millions and millions of people. It really is just an extraordinary humanitarian crisis. The UN Human Rights on Twitter also drawing attention to this, saying that the persecution of the Baha'is cannot continue. It is unacceptable for the Yemeni government and the de facto authorities in Sana'a to target anyone based on religion or belief, especially those belonging to religious minorities. So a real effort by UN agencies, the UN Red Cross and others to really get that strong message out there. This is a lady working at UNICEF in Yemen, appalled by reports of the killing of 5 children and the injury of others in an airstrike in Sada. This is a couple of days back as well, but she was drawing attention in this tweet to children being, from her point of view, attacked. Whether it's deliberate or not, I suppose, is another difficult to know. My home, Yemen today. This is a freelance journalist, also based in Sana'a. Population 27 million, more than 21 million need aid to survive. 3,600 schools across the country initially closed. So he's listing out again a whole range of sorry statistics, and even drawing attention on his Twitter account to incidents of malnutrition. And that is a friend of his who took a photograph of this malnourished child. So certainly Twitter is being used by those who want to draw attention to the severity of this humanitarian crisis in Yemen.
All right, many thanks for that, James Crean, and a story that we'll continue to follow here at France 24. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.